From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., the Congressional Report, with your host, Iowa Congressman Tom Latham.
This country is based on farms, on small businesses, and creating jobs and opportunities. That is the lifeblood of this nation.
And now your host, Congressman Tom Latham.
Hello. Small businesses form the backbone of the American economy. They provide a reliable source of jobs and investment, and they quickly become important fixtures in our communities. When difficult economic times set in and jobs dry up, independent business becomes even more important. When small businesses are able to grow, so does the economy. With so many Americans looking for work, we need to make sure we're giving small businesses the tools they need to create jobs. Joining me today is Bill Rys of the National Federation of Independent Business to discuss small jobs and business issues. And welcome, Bill. Great to have you with us. And tell us about yourself.
Sure.
What's your background, where you came from?
I'm originally from Pennsylvania, and I've been working here in Washington for about 10 years. Worked on Capitol Hill for a couple years for some different members of Congress. Worked at the Treasury Department for a while. My current position with the National Federation of Independent Business is I'm the NFIB's tax counsel, so I follow tax issues, tax policy changes, mostly at the federal level, but I also help out with some issues on the state level. My background also, I'm an attorney. I was in private practice for a little while, and it's a great organization to work with, and you get to really work with, as the intro said, and you said, the backbone of our economy. So we've got great members, and it's a good group to work with.
Well, I came out of a family small business, and NFIB was extremely important to our family business, to know what was going on, to keep us informed, and to really help us with some policy issues and seeing what was going on with the government, what that was doing to us all the time. Everybody's talking about jobs right now. What about small businesses? Where do they fit in the whole job creation equation?
Well, small businesses play a very important role in job creation. Over the last decade, small businesses accounted for about 2/3 of the net new job growth in the economy. And overall, small business employs about 50% of the American workforce and accounts for about 50% of the total gross domestic product. So small business plays a very important role in the overall economy, as well as on the job side in particular. The role they play in terms of job creation and innovation really is the backbone of our economy, and where we're going to find job creation and get us out of the current unemployment situation, it's got to be small businesses. We're not there yet, but we're going to get there.
Well, everybody talks about Wall Street, but it's actually Main Street where the rubber meets the road, and small businesses say, what the kind of role that they play in job creation in these small towns. I don't know if you want to talk any more about that.
Absolutely. I mean, they play a huge role. I mean, whether it's as a they can piggyback sometimes off of a local company that's a little bit more established. They fill small needs and fill small roles. If one company needs someone to transport something, or you need a construction company to come in to do a little fix-it work around the business or around your house, those are small businesses that do that stuff. So, they not only play the role in terms of the individual jobs they create, but also sort of that spider web effect that they have throughout the communities. It's hugely important, and it really is a place for innovation and creativity, and it really gives people the opportunity that, maybe you've been working for 10 or 15 years at a local construction firm, or maybe a local accounting firm, and you decide you want to strike out on your own. I mean, you have the opportunity to do it, and you have the opportunity to maybe fill a niche that you see out there that the community doesn't have, or that you think could be done better. And that's really the how the economy really grows and works, and the role that small business plays. It's hugely important. It's hugely important for our communities, and especially when you get to rural areas. In particular, small businesses really play a big role in terms of sponsoring community events and community, working with local charities and local schools and institutions, little league teams, you name it. The small businesses play a big role, not only in terms of the job creation of the community, but really being a foundation for the community as well.
Right. Yeah, and if there was ever something going on in Alexander, we were the first stop out there as far as trying to get support, which is great. That's what it's all about.
I think back when I was a little kid and playing Little League Baseball, it was the local auto dealer who sponsored our team,
right.
and the local convenience store that sponsored another team, and that's really, it really plays an important role, and you begin to know those businesses, and they become just more than a business as part of your community, and that's really the important role that small business plays.
Out of all the employment throughout the country, what percentage work for small businesses?
It's about 50%. It's about 50% overall, so it's a very large role, and it's even more important in job creation. When we've seen economic downturns from year to year, recessions in the past, small business really starts to lead a charge in terms of job creation. A good example of this is in the early 1980s. We were coming out of the inflationary era of the late 1970s. Small business really spiked in the early 80s and really helped to be a big source for job creation. And so thus far we're not seeing that. And that's really
why did it spike then?
Well, I think there was a lot of confidence. I think one thing is there was a lot of good policies coming along. I think we were moving out of a lot of uncertainty. We saw some good policies in terms of some tax changes right away. That's certainly something that's very important for small businesses, and I think there was just generally a confidence that it was time to step up, time to move the economy. You had confidence in the economy that you were making that investment and the investment was going to pay off, and we haven't seen that yet. As our chief economist likes to say, we've been bouncing along the bottom now for a couple of years, and we need that bounce to stick.
I was going to say, in comparison, what's the climate today as far as small businesses for them to expand and grow and create jobs?
We do a monthly small business economic trend survey. This is the most up-to-date, regular data of what's going on Main Street, and we've seen lower numbers since about September of '08. Was really when our confidence index took a dive, and it struggled to move up from that. It's moved up a little bit. Some months we've seen the numbers be a little bit higher. Some months then we see the numbers bounce back down. So confidence is still a real big concern for small businesses. And we dig a little bit deeper into that survey when we see things like capital expenditures and investment and plans to hire. Those numbers have stayed stagnant, particularly on capital expenditures. We're at near an all-time low in the 30-year history of the survey. And until we start seeing those types of numbers spike up, and some other factors that go along with that, and we can talk about that a little bit more, we're still going to see small business sort of hold back on the reins and not take off in a way that really gets the economy moving.
Well, why is that happening? Why is there no confidence? Why is it because of policies that are in place today that are causing the lack of confidence?
Well, when we do the surveys, and we've done this both on a monthly basis and on a larger basis, and we've asked this question, the biggest trend we're seeing from month to month that's a problem is simply what we call in the survey lost sales. Small businesses don't have customers coming in the door. They don't have contracts to fill. There's just less work to do. So that's the main reason, number one. But you're following that up with a lot of policy changes that are creating a lot of uncertainty. If number one is lost sales in this survey, number two has consistently been uncertainty about the political climate, about policy changes. And so you sort of got a recipe here where you've had 2 years of a very rough economic patch, followed by what has been a lot of uncertainty and a lot of changes about policy coming out of Washington and the states, even at the local level. And that really doesn't give the small business owner any real firm ground to stand on to be able to say, I can make a decision, I can hire a new worker, I can expand my business. And until we see some leveling out of both of those factors, it's going to be a real challenge.
Do you see anything positive right now? I mean, if you're a small business person, do you see that this is maybe we're turning the corner, that there's something positive out there, or policies that are helping?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, we've been sort of bouncing on the bottom in the survey. So, I mean, it's not getting worse, but it's sort of staying stagnant. And so I guess if there's a light out there, it's that a lot of the pullback has occurred. Now it's sort of, I think, surveying the future and seeing where you go. There are certainly some policy changes that we think that our members are saying would definitely be helpful right now. Unfortunately, a number of the changes that we've seen recently have, I think, caused them more concern than have caused them, to be optimistic about the future. And in particular, the health care bill is something that we as an organization opposed. Our members are very much opposed to it. And you've got a lot of other threats out there: tax increases, cap and trade. Those are not good policy prescriptions for job growth and economic development.
So you're saying that these kind of big ticket items are having a profound impact as far as the confidence in the small businesses.
They really are.
And also, you talk about demand or people walking in the door. Consumers today are actually saving money rather than spending money because of their concern too, and they see the tax implications. What do you see happening coming down the road?
Well, the major tax implications for small businesses are the expiring individual rates. In 2001, I know something you supported, we very much appreciate it, I know all our members did, was across-the-board tax cut for every taxpayer in the country. They're set to expire at the end of this year. December 31, 2010, all those tax rates go up unless Congress acts. Now, we've been hearing, well, we'll fix the rates for some, but not for others. Well, here we are at the end of July, and we still haven't dealt with those individual rates. And that leads for a lot of uncertainty with small business owners. They want to know what their tax rate's going to be next year. And when you tack on new tax increases in the health care bill, tax increases at the state and local level, you really start to dogpile and start to put forth what is a tax rate that really becomes untenable for a small business to deal with. And that's just on the tax side. We can get to the regulatory stuff and the paperwork issues. It really becomes a challenge for small business to know what the groundwork is. Well,
and the small business today is looking at their marginal tax rates going up next year, capital gains tax rates going up 33.3%.
Right.
Dividends, as far as income from dividends, going up from 15 to whatever their marginal tax rate is. You see nothing happening as far as the estate tax or the death tax, which is a big issue in small businesses. That compounded, I really, I know it when you look at capital gains, and you basically are being punitive on people who do exactly what we need to have happen in this country. That's invest capital.
That's right. I mean, the rate of return you get on your capital gains are what you've invested in, whether it's in stock in a business or another capital, your property, your real estate. When those tax rates go up, we see a depressing in the amount of investment. People hold back knowing they're not going to get the same rate of return. And right now, the rate of return on things like real estate in many places is way below what it was at its high. It's going to take some time to dig out of that naturally, but when you tack onto that a higher tax rate, that becomes a problem. And in the health care bill, they added an additional tax on certain incomes, such as dividend and capital gains and rents for certain earners. That's another challenge. I mean, you keep stacking these taxes one on top of the other, and that gives you less and less margin to turn that money around and reinvest it.
Well, what's the NFIB's position? I talk about tax cuts for the rich, and a lot of people argue that small businesses that are normally subchapter S, they take all the income from that business personally.
That's right.
And pay tax on the full amount. Anyone in small business knows you take out what you need to live on, and then everything else stays in the business is put back into it. But how many of the, quote, rich are small business people out there struggling? Yeah,
a considerable amount of the individual earners in the top two brackets do fall into being owners of small businesses. And as you said, 75% of small businesses are organized so that they pay their business income at the individual level. They don't deal with the corporate tax at all. That's a different type of business structure. That's so when you talk about increasing, in many cases, in many cases, those are larger businesses. But you're right. That money, you take out what you need to pay yourself a reasonable compensation, a wage. But that money has to go back into the business. But when you earn it for the year, you have to report it. I mean, Uncle Sam wants their share, so you still have to report that income, even though that's money you're going to plow back into the business to make new investments, to hire new workers, to buy new inventory, to keep the lights on. All that money goes back into the business. We looked at this and we asked small business owners basically how much do you earn and where do you fall into the bracket, and we broke it down based on the size of the business. We get up to the 20 to 250 employees, which are still fairly small businesses. A good portion of those businesses are making enough money. They might not be taking that home, but they have to report it, and that goes back into their business. But a good chunk of those businesses, upwards of close to 2/3, are falling into that tax bracket, and they employ a substantial number of people, well over 3 million workers. So we're talking about jobs, and we're talking about close to 10% unemployment. We shouldn't be taxing any small business right now. We should let them all know your taxes are not going to go up next year. The money you make this year, invest it back in your business, keep the economy, get the economy going again. It's really that simple.
Mm-hmm. I know there's tremendous uncertainty with small business people about the tax situation. Mm-hmm. What is the health care bill that was passed, signed into law? What effects is that going to have on a small business? Why did you oppose it?
Well, we opposed it for a number of reasons. The number one issue for our members, for NFIB members over the course of the last, I think, 2 decades has been the cost of health insurance, and we've continued to see it go up with no relief. So first and foremost for us, and we've played a very big role, we're very active in the healthcare debate, was we've got to find a way to reduce the cost of health insurance, find a better way to buy it, find a better way to be able for employers to provide it and employees to get health care. At the end of the day, this health care bill doesn't do anything to reduce costs. In fact, it's probably going to raise costs. When you look at all the new burdens that this is going to place on the business, just beyond the health provisions that are in this, the tax provisions are fairly sweeping in their changes. And that's creating a lot of concern for small businesses, and it adds to that uncertainty. I have health insurance for my employees today. Is it going to stay the same? We've got these new grandfathering rules coming out. Small businesses are struggling with those to figure out, am I under those rules? How's this going to change my plan? Is it going to increase my costs? When small businesses are working on thin margins right now with lost sales and a lot of uncertainty, when you continuously increase the cost of the employees that they need to run their business, that becomes a real challenge for small business owners. And that was our concern with the health care bill. We could talk a little bit more about specifics if you like. But
right, yeah, and that's just on the cost side, the president's own experts have said that it's going to increase costs of providing health care by $311 billion. So any kind of idea that it's going to cost less and that didn't even include the reimbursement for the doctors. Here you've got a health care reform bill that doesn't include doctors.
We just left some things off the table, so we'll deal with those
it didn't
later.
look like it cost so much. But it's not just the taxes, but what about some of the regulations, reporting things that now small business purchases something from another business, they have to send them a 1099.
Yeah, that's right. This has caused a lot of concern amongst our members and small businesses in general, and I thank you for supporting a bill to repeal this section immediately, because it starts going into effect right away, pretty much at the beginning of next year. Right now, if you get services from an unincorporated business in your business, so you hire a sole proprietor plumber to come in and do work in your bathrooms, and it's more than $600, you have to report that transaction to the IRS. What the health care bill does is says that any service from any business over $600, incorporated or unincorporated, so that's every business, has to be reported to the IRS. And in addition to that, they went a step further and said any purchase of goods over $600 also needs to be reported to the IRS. When you think of the reach of this, if you buy office supplies at the Staples, or you buy some equipment at the Home Depot, or you buy feed for a farm, all of that stuff is now going to have to be reported. It's going to be cumulative, so you only have to fill out one form for each vendor, but you're going to have to track all your payments through the year and determine how much it is. You're going to have to get a taxpayer identification number from every one of your vendors. You yourself are going to have to provide the taxpayer identification number to everyone who does business with you. And if the taxpayer identification number isn't correct, you're going to have to withhold 28% on the contract and send it over to the IRS. So in some cases, that even becomes more untenable because maybe you have telephone service from a large telecom corporation, or you have air travel. How are you going to withhold on contracts like that? Where do you send the forms? How often do you have to update them? What do you do if you can't find the taxpayer identification number? How do you find the taxpayer identification number? This is an enormous new paperwork burden on small business. Tax paperwork is already the most expensive burden the federal government places on small business, $74 per hour. It costs a small business 66% more to comply with the tax code than it does a large business. This was added into the health care bill, has nothing to do with health care, and it's just going to be a new cost for small business owners. This has got to be repealed now.
What was the rationale for this? I mean, what benefit is there with all of this new reporting?
The rationale is that we have underreported income, so the IRS needs more information, so they have more information about every taxpayer, about all of your expenses, all of your deduction, all of the income you've earned, to then basically audit you. This will be an audit tool to send IRS agents out to small businesses mostly, because this is where all the studies are saying this comes from. To go out, audit small businesses and collect that money. What we would say is, how about we simplify the tax code? It's massive in its scope. You can't comply with it unless you have an accountant or a tax lawyer or an enrolled agent or someone who's experienced with the tax code. How about we simplify the tax code, make it easier to file your taxes, make it easier to know what you've earned and claim your deductions, reduce the paperwork, make it easier to file. Instead, we've taken the opposite step and made it harder.
Yeah, and that's probably why we're going to have to hire, what is it, 16,500 new IRS agents and auditors.
That's right.
To go out and do all of this.
And this is just one thing that the IRS is now responsible
for. $10 billion of new costs to the IRS to hire all of these new agents that they're going to have. What else do you see? How about the penalties, the mandates for small businesses? How does that going to affect the small
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of concern. A lot of it's still the unknown. You know, in terms of providing health insurance, you have to provide a qualified benefit, you know, and the government is going to decide what that is. And we don't know what that looks like yet. So, I mean, you can kind of continue to do what you're doing now, although, like I said, we have these new grandfather rules that come out now, which will deal with whether you have to make changes to your plan now or not. And a small plan may knock you out of the grandfathered status. But as we go forward, I mean, this health care bill unrolls year by year. 2012, there's new requirements, 13 new requirements. By 2014 is when the really big requirements come into play. And you have to have a qualified health insurance plan. We don't know what that is yet. And until small business knows what it is, they don't know if their plans are going to comply. So every year, in addition to the cost increases you've been seeing from year to year, you now have this additional layer of issue and concern to be worried about relative to your health insurance. And that's going to be a big problem for small business.
So things like health savings accounts, things like that will no longer be available because they don't qualify.
Yeah, we don't know yet. I mean, we're not sure what's going to qualify. Some of that may qualify now with health savings accounts and things like flexible spending accounts. There are changes to those in this bill. There's a higher penalty on HSAs for certain withdrawals. There are going to be limits on what you can use your FSA for. There will be limits on how much you can put into your flexible spending account. So some of the things we've seen that have allowed for more flexibility and more individual responsibility about health insurance and given small businesses and their employees more options, more choices to provide health insurance. Some of those things are going to start to be pulled back a little bit from place to place. And again, you know, this is going to be a big regulatory effort. So it's sort of one of those. Stay tuned. There's more to come.
Well, what about the number of employees if a small business has to have them come under the jurisdiction? And you know, what's a small business going to do? Is he finally just going to, you know, that business throw up their hands and say, I'm going to just turn it over to the pools and I'll pay my fine?
Yeah, I think a lot is we're going to have to. I think a lot of this is we're going to have to figure out how all these pieces work together, and that's one of the challenges. This thing is a big puzzle, and the pieces will start falling into place. Now, for businesses that are at 50 employees or around 50 employees, in that case, you do have to offer health insurance or pay a penalty. And you have to count your employees. Basically, you have to come up with our full-time equivalent employees, which amount to about 30 hours a week. So even if you have part-time employees and you think, well, I only have 40 full-time employees, but you've got some summer work or maybe you have a busy season during certain parts of the year, I mean, that's certainly not uncommon with seasonal businesses, you're going to have to count those employees and figure out how do they fall in under the count for my requirements to provide health insurance, and what health insurance do I have to provide. So it's going to be a lot of new burden on small businesses, not just the idea of buying health insurance, but how is my business set up in such a way that I'm either inside or outside those requirements? And those are things that you're going to have to consider along with the health insurance, what your health insurance looks like.
You know, there's an individual mandate that says everybody has to purchase health insurance. There are lawsuits. I think 20-some states are suing the federal government.
That's right.
Have you had any involvement in that?
We have. We actually joined the 20 states in that lawsuit. We are one of the plaintiffs. We believe that the requirement to buy insurance is unconstitutional. This is the first time where the federal government has basically said your inactivity is going to be regulated. And that's a very broad scope of the authority for the federal government. That provides us a lot of concern. That's why we joined the lawsuit. Ultimately, this law does not allow our business owners, our members, our mission as an organization is to support our members so that they can run their business. This doesn't allow them to make the decisions they can about their business.
You know, another huge issue that actually passed the House last year was the cap and trade bill. And it's going to have new taxes on energy, have the government basically control the marketing and emissions, things like this. What's your position on the cap and trade? What's it going to do to small business? Yeah,
we have a lot of concerns about the cap and trade legislation. The bill that passed the House in particular was something we worked against. I know something you did not support. At the end of the day, this is going to increase energy costs. And, you know, when small businesses are squeezed, when they have fewer customers, They have a lot of new uncertainty. That with the price of energy going up, there's not a business out there that doesn't rely on energy in some way. If you have a company that ships goods, you've got delivery costs. If you run a store or a restaurant, you've got to have the stove on, and refrigerators, and the lights. All of that are energy costs. This is part of the cost of doing business. If we put a policy in place, it's going to increase the cost of what is one of the most fundamental basic costs on your balance sheet. That's something that's also going to harm business, and we're just not sure what the full-term implications are in terms of the overall economy. I mean, what impact does this have for other countries that don't have a cap-and-trade program like we would? So, when you look at the expansion of government and the number of new programs and regulations that are included in that, the cap-and-trade proposals, as we've seen them, it raises a lot of concern for small businesses as to how they're going to be regulated and what their energy costs are going to be.
I know in Iowa the estimates are that cap-and-trade, because of the increased costs, and especially targeted on manufacturing, small manufacturers to the largest in the country. But in Iowa, it's going to cost about 17,000 jobs a year each of the next 10 years. Nationwide, it's about 2.5 to 3 million jobs a year. And those jobs are going to go overseas. I mean, because we're just not going to be competitive
Absolutely.
anymore.
You think how those small manufacturers, we talked at the beginning about the role small business plays in the community. Those small manufacturers really are a linchpin of so many communities. And you think of the local restaurants who feed those workers at lunchtime, or the cleaning crew who comes in and cleans up the shop. I mean, all those businesses feed off that small manufacturer. And when those businesses start going away, and when those businesses start to disappear, that has an impact all the way down Main Street, and every business is impacted by it. Your community bank, your local retailers, all of those things are impacted, and that's one of those sort of the spiderweb effect that these kind of policies have that really have a concern for us.
Well, it's fixed cost to a small business where hiring more people is an optional thing.
That's right.
And if you're going to spend more on energy, you're probably not going to hire more people.
That's right. I mean, if you got to pay to keep the lights on, something's got to give somewhere else.
Right. A lot of discussion. We're going to run short on time here. I could go out all day with you on this, but a lot of concern about the federal deficit, the spending. We're going to have $1.3 trillion deficit this year. About 42 cents of every dollar the government spends. Next year will be borrowed money. Our national debt's up to nearly $14 trillion. What impact does that have on small business?
Well, I can tell you it's something that our members are more and more concerned about. I mean, at the end of the day, the more government borrowing you have, the more that crowds out private investment, private borrowing. At the end of the day, to fill those gaps, we keep hearing about tax increases, and that means higher costs, higher tax costs for small businesses, higher compliance costs for small businesses. So at the end of the day, that's a bad recipe of less private investment, higher taxes. When you look at the 90s, as we did try to get the debt under control, I know you were here in Congress then and worked hard on that, and you look at the positive response we had from that. We need to figure out a way to find out what is it that our government provides, come up with a reasonable tax rate. When you look at the amount of government expenditure we've had over the last number of years, it's tremendous. And can the tax rate keep up with that? Right now, we're way behind on revenue, which only means a tax increase, and that's a big concern for our members.
Like I said before, I could go on all day with you, but we're out of time. And
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bill, for being
Thank you.
with us
Thanks for all
today.
you do for small business. We appreciate it.
You bet. Our country's overall economic health is tied closely to the ability of small businesses to grow and create jobs. The economic crisis of 2008 has left small businesses and American families with uncertainty and doubt. It's time to remove that uncertainty so small businesses can flourish once again. I'd like to thank my guests one more time for being here, and I hope you'll tune in next time on the Congressional Report.
From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., this has been the Congressional Report with Iowa Congressman Tom Latham. Have a question, comment, or concern? Congressman Latham wants to hear from you.